Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us here at INC Live for the UFC 291 preview show. My name is Karl Bainbridge, and I am joined by the man on the right-hand side of my screen. He is the Oppenheimer to my Barbie. It's Joe Neal. Joe, thank you very much for joining us.
Fantastic one. I need to see Oppenheimer, but I'm probably going to see both at one point.
Yeah. Is that
I'm glad
your
to be
own
here.
doing or a girlfriend?
Probably both, admittingly. I like Margot Robbie, but I'm not going to tell her that.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be the Devon to your Bubba, even though historically I used to be the Spike Dudley. But
Yeah, you got promoted.
yeah, now I'm the one getting the tables. I used to be the one being thrown through it by Kane, but now I'm the one getting them. Yeah.
Does that mean I'm going to be a champion of TNA wrestling when it's on its last legs?
Yeah, and then you also get Velvel Sky. So
I
congratulations.
approve.
Yeah, and I said I at least I'm not the perv cam, I did not know that was a thing until OSW.
I'm glad they haven't introduced that in the UFC, but like knowing what Dana White is introducing, I wouldn't be surprised.
At first the gimmick fights, then the perv cam. Let's all profit from here on out.
I'm telling you, we have a stone's throw away from there being an interlude during the pay-per-view for Power Slap.
Oh my god. If that happened, I don't know. I'd be so horrified.
Nothing to be horrified about, though, when it comes to our next pay-per-view, because we are here to talk about UFC 291. It's been a busy couple of weeks for the UFC. Of course, we just had the London card, which took place yesterday. Joe will have a recap on that one coming up on the channel. It's probably online right now as we speak, Joe.
Yeah, probably. And I get to talk and laugh a little bit about the card. But hey, I was actually it was a pretty good card because it happened earlier in the day for me. So I kind of missed it. I'm thinking it was at the normal time, and I got to go back and watch it, and I'm very happy I got to watch it.
And in 7 days' time, we're going to be talking about what could be one of the most action-packed cards of the year. UFC 291 is taking place from Salt Lake City, and the BMF title is back up for grabs. So we're going to talk about a few of the X's and O's about the card before we actually dive into the prelims and then the five-fight main card. As mentioned before, we are back in Salt Lake City, so it's the second fight of what I believe is a 5-year contract with the owners of the building. And I have mixed feelings about this one, Joe, because on one hand, I've always been somebody who likes when the UFC go to different places. It's one of the big issues I've had with the Apex is that instead of going to like Prague or maybe to Berlin or doing an event in Asia time and again, all those cards are now taking place in the Apex, which I'm a little bit bored of. And if it's not the Apex, then it's T-Mobile, Florida, or Texas. So I am glad we're going to somewhere which is a little bit different. However, the last time we had a card, UFC 278 in Salt Lake City, and there was a lot of fighters that underestimated just how bad the altitude was.
Oh yeah, I always think of I believe it was I remember the exact number of the card. You're really good with numbers. You might be able to remember, but I remember Ryan Bader Rampage was on the card, but Czech Congo Marku Huntu was I have to call him that, Pride fan. Mark Huntu. And but was on that card, and Mark Hunt pieced up Czech. No, it was Mark Hunt and someone else. But Mark Hunt just couldn't finish him. They both just gassed out. I don't think it was Czech Congo.
No,
but it was in Colorado.
Yeah, I think the Johnson versus Bader was like 2016. I think January 2016.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit before then.
Because I remember it was that card. I'm now, dear Google. But yeah, it was on that card, and they were in altitude, and it was just horrendous. Like all that heavyweight fight got bad. It might have been. My brain also thinks it was Ben Rothwell as well. That was Japan. That card happened. But regardless, luckily there's no heavyweight fights on the main card.
There is one on the prelims, and there's also a light heavyweight bout. But one thing I do think the UFC have done well is they have restricted it primarily to the lower weight classes. So if there are altitude issues, it's not going to be as important. Are you personally a fan of sort of like the high altitude UFC cards? Do you want them to go into places like Salt Lake City, Colorado?
I I think it's a mixed bag. I think you really have to be smart in how you book it. And I personally would like to see like encouraging fighters to go there early to acclimate in their training. So, like, it's probably the most famous example. Once I try not to sneeze.
Yeah. If it makes you feel any better, Joe, I have been feeling really under the weather as well. So we're both walking wounded right now.
Yeah, for me, I just allergies. I guess I was random. But yeah, so the most famous example is Kane and Verdum, which took place in Mexico City, Elevation, and Verdum went like a month before the fight to get used to it, and Kane's like, "I'll be fine," and he gassed out in that fight. Kane did, and which is very odd for that era of Kane Velasquez to gas.
Cardio Kane.
Yeah, like the guy who's in round 5 throwing 100 significant strikes around, basically at heavyweight, and it was kind of shocking and kind of alarming. So I think they need to kind of almost not mandate it necessarily, but really encourage, hey, you might want to go there a little early. And I know that's going to lead into another thing of fighters going, I don't have the money to go there early. So I have a solution for that. It's pretty simple. I don't know why the UFC hasn't been doing it. It's paying the fighters what they should be paid.
Yes. Not 12 and 12 contracts off the Contender Series.
Yeah, I have a strange feeling that if they just paid the fighters well, that wouldn't be an issue. But that being said, I think you need to kind of be ready for it, like mentally and physically, because it is a whole new beast. I've been at Elevation, and it is insane. It's a little insane in like how different it is. And I was a kid and I was noticing it. So I can't imagine what me, almost 30 gonna be like if I was in Elevation. Now I'd probably be rolled down, you know. Um, but yeah, I like it and I don't like it. It's just a mixed bag, and I think you have to be a little careful on how you book it, because I think what they are doing here is pretty smart in not putting heavyweights on the main card, because you and me both know that the prelims are for like, people who aren't really into fights. They're gonna watch it, and it's supposed to incentivize them to buy the pay-per-view. So maybe not having your headlining fight for that prelim be, the main fight be a heavyweight fight would be a pretty good idea. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
And we're going to do that right now. You read my mind, Joe. Great minds think alike.
And we're the best minds there are.
Well, apart from Luke and Brian.
Yeah, I mean, those guys just have the edge. Luke Thomas speaks more Spanish than me, I think, which is embarrassing for me.
So we're going to talk about these prelims in a bit more detail now. You can see those on our screen here. And Joe mentioned before there that the prelim headliner is going to be a heavyweight bout, as Derek Lewis takes on Marcus Rogerio de Lima. And I have to say, I've been a bit taken by surprise, because Derek Lewis has always been considered as one of the sort of staples of the UFC sort of top 5, top 6 range. But he has had some bad losses on his record recently, and he's down to number 11. And a lot of people are starting to think, hey, he's, 36, 37 years old now. Is this maybe Derek Lewis's last stand? Is this the end of him if he was to lose?
I think if he loses, it's, about time to write him off. And I hate saying that, but I think it'd probably be time to write him off as like that top 5 guy. I'm kind of written him off as a title contender personally.
Yeah, I don't think he's ever going to get back to a belt.
No, I don't think he'll ever compete for it. But I mean, I think if he loses this, it's probably like him taking on like a name like Tom Aspinall or Taito Ivasa again, or Pavlovich again, like any of those guys like that. Probably not happening. And it's kind of shocking to see his downfall, but it's also really hard to count him out, I think.
What do you think's been the biggest factor? Do you think it is just age catching up with him, or because when you look at his losses, like the Taito Ivasa loss, he was winning that fight, and then Tai obviously caught him in a big flurry. It was a chaotic sort of heavyweight brawl, and then Sergei Spivak, who I think is criminally underrated. I think he has got a lot better over these last couple of years. And he took advantage of the fact that Derek has these limitations on the ground.
Mhm.
Is it father time? Is it the division catching up? What do you think is the biggest cause?
I think if you look at it, he's lost to Tai Tuivasa, Pavlovich, and Spivak back to back to back in all three of those fights. And two of those guys are part of that new guard coming up, while another guy feels like, in my opinion, the current better version of him, in a sense. Um, but I think a lot of it's durability as well. I think it's just like father time and durability on top of fighting these younger guns that don't have the wear and tear of him on his body and his, everything. Because he's 38. This is what he's coming up on 40 fights as a heavyweight, and like it's kind of easy to see that when you're hitting that 45 range, no one has the fountain of youth access that Andrei Arlovsky has, because I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it a million more. He's going to be decisioning guys on Apex cards until we're in our 70s and 80s. So it's just kind of the nature of the game. Um, he's going to break Couture's record. I'm convinced at this point. But I don't know. Like I think it's a lot of it is just he's fading, he's slowing down, and he probably still has that big power, but he's not able to get himself in positions to land it, and he can't take the shot like he used to be able to take it.
Is there anybody else that stands out for you on the prelims?
Last time I said Miranda Maverick, she lost, so I will be omitting that one. Trevin Giles is always pretty entertaining. If Roman Kopylov is the guy I remember, yeah, Roman Kopylov, he seems pretty good, honestly, to me.
I'm glad you
Uh,
mentioned that Giles versus Bonfim match, because I think that's a real litmus test for Bonfim, because he had that big
yeah,
highlight reel KO, beat Terence McKinney on his UFC debut. Trevin Giles is
yeah,
someone who sort of, I'm willing to put him in that sort of welterweight action alley. So he's in there
yeah.
with sort of like the Nico Prices, the Randy Browns of the world, where you can expect to get these sort of entertaining sort of mid-card brawls. So it's going to be a good
Mhm.
test to see how good Bonfim is.
I'm very curious to see how good he is, because he's a very good grappler. Like he snatches necks pretty easily as well. So I'm very curious about that one. The other one is Jake Matthews taking on Darius Flowers, who has like a lot of weird experience in like boxing and then like grappling as well. So that's kind of an interesting one to me, because I think Jake Matthews, while he is anti-fighters getting paid, he does have the ability to put on good fights. And Matthew Semmelsberger as well is because it's pretty hard to count him out.
Isn't Matthews still like, what, 25, 26? I feel like he's been in the UFC for like goodness knows how long and he's still a kid.
Yeah, he just turned 30. Like it's kind of wild. Like he's just turned 30, and when did he join the UFC?
I think he was
He
like
joined it in
19, 20 years
2020.
old.
Yeah, no, he joined it at 20 or 2020. He joined it, but it feels like it feels like he's been around forever. And he also has an amateur fight against William Knight, the slow lumbering doesn't do anything kind of guy at 205. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
So if there are any prelims that you are interested in, then please list those in the comments below, because we are very curious to see what fights you would like us to cover in a bit more detail when we do further preview shows. But now, though, we're going to be going onto the main card. Now, there have been a couple of changes to the card, so we're doing this based off Marcel Dorf's most recent card order. So this may
Mhm.
change around, so we do apologise if things are out of sync as the card changes throughout the week. But the fight we have listed up here is taking place in the welterweight division, and it is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson taking on Michel Pereira, number 7 versus number 15. Originally supposed to be a prelim fight, which really took me by surprise given how action-packed this match could be. But the Paulo Costa fight was cancelled. Thompson versus Pereira gets moved up. Stephen Thompson comes in as a minus 200 favourite, Pereira at 170. Do you think the
Mhm.
bookmakers are on the right lines here? Do you think Thompson should be that much of a favourite?
I personally think Wonderboy is like a really safe bet in this fight, because Beheda is. I feel like Beheda is hard to really stand on as like on your pick on him. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's really hard to because he's such a chaotic, wild guy. He can be very thoughtful and technical, so to speak. But sometimes he just wants to run off the cage 500 times, do 50 backflips instead of finishing the guy. And all right, now he's gassed out. Like, and I just lost some money there. So in terms of gambling and betting on who's going to win, I think Wonder Boy's the safer pick. But so I think he does deserve those odds. But at the end of the day, it's also really hard to, I think this matchup's really interesting.
Yeah, and
So if
hopefully it's going to live up to the billing as well because we've got two strikers. Wonderboy a bit more karate based, prefers to counter strike. Pereira, as you know, sort of like the MMA wild man, as he sort of built up his reputation, especially outside the UFC. But ever since the Tristan Connolly fight, which was a very embarrassing loss for him, bearing in mind he missed weight as well against a guy who's naturally a 145er. Since then, 5 wins in a row. Admittedly, the last one was over a year ago. But we are starting to see Michel Pereira sort of realize, hey, I need to stop being this clown. I'm going to try and take things a little bit seriously. And the 5-fight winning streak, Ponzinibbio, Fiallo, Nico Price, Kalen Williams, and Zalin Imadaev. So he has started to pick it up.
Mm-hmm. Well, sure, decent names. Like,
Yes.
none of those guys are. I think like maybe except Imazayov probably is like the only like bad one on there. But no, all those guys on there are like legitimately talented mid card, mid level. Welterweights at the least. And I mean, I love my boy Ponzinibbio, but his days are past him. But that fight's very good. He's looked very good. Yeah, I really hope he keeps rising. And so this fight has really caught my eye.
Yeah. So obviously we talked about Pereira a little bit there. We'll talk about Wonderboy, some of the sort of X's and O's regarding him. So he is coming into this fight off a win. He beat Kevin Holland in a UFC main event in December. And along with Kevin Holland, we've got wins over Jeff Neal, Vincent Luque, Jorge Masvidal, Rory McDonald, Johnny Hendricks, Jake Ellenberger, and Robert Whittaker when he fought at welterweight. So a big who's who of some top welterweight contenders there. And even though I don't think Wonderboy is ever going to fight for a belt again, I think bearing in mind he's 40 years old, Father Time does catch up with people, I do think he is a great litmus test for guys like Pereira to see whether or not they are truly elite.
I agree. I 100% agree. Before the Gilbert Burns fight, I actually thought Wonderboy was probably a win or two away from getting the title, or for going for the title, and I thought he was an interesting matchup, if not almost outright bad, for a Kamaru Usman, who a lot of his shots aren't from very far out. They're from he wants to kind of get in close and get a hold of you, and a guy like Thompson, in my mind, isn't going to let him do that. So, but things change, and I'm kind of with you on that. I think he is probably the best litmus test for a guy to break into that truly elite area, which I think is very interesting given him the Pereira matchup.
And how do you think Thompson's style has evolved? Because obviously he came in with this karate-based background, and we have seen a lot of karate fighters. I mean, there are exceptions, like Machida, obviously one of the big ones, MVP. So there are guys with that karate style who can find success, but more often than not, the first instinct is take him down and limit him on the ground.
Yeah.
We haven't really seen that all too much from Wonderboy for the majority of his career. It's only sort of recently we've had like the Bilal Muhammads and the Gilbert Burns exploiting that. How do you think Wonderboy has been able to sort of translate his karate style to find success in the UFC?
I think a lot of it's movement, like his footwork. I think that's why he's losing a little bit more of these fights recently to these wrestlers. Is before it was really hard to get a hold of the guy. I got to cover on the Retro Review. Shameless plug. I have no shame on this one. I got to cover probably one of the best fights in MMA history, I think, in Wonderboy, Tyron Woodley. And Woodley had a little bit of a hard time getting a hold of him to put him on his back at first. And he almost kind of had to corral him and cut him off with some very good offensive footwork as well. So, like a lot of wrestlers historically don't have the footwork. They just kind of chase, They don't really cut the ring off from him and anything like that. So him having that footwork really kind of helped, and that speed from his youth was really helping him avoid situations where you can't get taken down, where you're not getting taken down, so to speak. Um, I think like always like an interesting idea is uh, for years ago when Habib came back from injury and fought Barboza, he chased Barboza on a straight line, and Barboza just never capitalized on it. And it's like I remember watching that go, wow, if Habib can't make weight and goes up to 170, I wonder if he could pull. I wonder how that would go with Wonder Boy, because Wonder Boy very quick footwork, but he's kind of slowed down. People are now able to get a hold of him, and on the ground he's decent, but he's not exemplary off his back. Like he's married to a member of the Machado family, but that as AJ Lee once said, uh, talent isn't necessarily transmitted a certain way. But no, I think he's a purple belt under the Machados, which I hold the Machados in a higher level of respect and pedigree over the Gracies personally. And so I think that's good, but it's, it just isn't enough, against like a very strong wrestler.
So it would be interesting to see, bearing in mind the sort of grappling frailties that Wonder Boy's been shown recently. Michel Pereira is primarily known as a striker, and I expect it to be primarily a striking-based match. But we did see against Diego Sanchez, Michel Pereira having a lot of success, taking Sanchez down, holding him there, and if it wasn't for the illegal knee, he would have won that fight, using primarily a grappling-based style.
Yeah, and take the ultimate defense against this style, take the man down.
Yep. Joshua Fabian's only win.
It's. I still find myself watching many documentaries about the man. It's alarming.
Because I look at the analytics on the YouTube channel, and obviously, admittedly, they're not doing too well because people wouldn't watch the Ali versus Inoki video. Shame on you. But one of the videos that always still seems to do well with the algorithm is the Fabia video. There's something about that story that just appeals to people.
It's haunting. It's the first cult I think I've seen, outside of Conor McGregor's fan base. Still got it. Oh. Still got it. But yeah, it's like the first real cult I've seen in MMA. It's like kind of haunting. I'm sure there's other instances of cult-like behavior, but that is an absolute cult. It's just haunting stuff. Beige Frequency has like a multiple hour-long escapade over Diego Sanchez and it is, it's a story. It's kind of depressing, admittingly, but yeah, I think Michel Pereira, it was in I always forget his name. It was the Russian that slapped him at the weigh-ins.
I think that might have been Imadaev.
Yeah, Imadaev. He took him down. Because he was beating him up, slapping him the entire fight, basically. And then he just got a single, turned it over, and slammed him on the ground, took his back, and choked him out like it was nothing. Made him look like he didn't belong. And I don't think it's out of the question for Pereira to, attempt that against Wonder Boy, especially because he is very quick.
Yep. There is one big concern that I do have when it comes to Michel Pereira, and we've seen this in a lot of his fights, and I think it's going to be amplified in Salt Lake City. Cardio.
Yeah. Yes. He cuts a lot of weight. I've seen him fight at like 203. He is if you just look at him compared to most welterweights, he is massive. He is just a big old dude. And we're fighting an elevation. Maybe we shouldn't have too many fights at elevation. I'm starting to come around. But yeah, I think that's going to be a big factor in the fight, and that's why it's really hard for me to pick Pereira here.
It's the big thing that's shirking me from picking him as well. So I am going to be leaning towards Wonder Boy for this one. I do think there is value in a Pereira win based off him having a grappling advantage and Wonder Boy being 40 years old, starting to slow down a little bit. There is all potential that Pereira could catch him early. But I think the longer this fight goes, the more I favour Wonder Boy. So I'm going to be picking Wonder Boy to win this one, unanimous decision. Because one other thing about Michel Pereira, people look at the 11 losses next to his name as something to hold against him. Only ever been stopped twice, and only once by KO. He has a hell of a chin given how much he cuts.
Oh yeah, it's when you think about how much weight he cuts, and he's only been finished like that once, it's alarming. I think funny enough, if there's any fight that's going to be a draw on this card, it could probably be this one. I could see Pereira getting that 10-8 round one, being gassed, and surviving 10-9s from Wonder Boys in 2 and 3. I could potentially see that, but I think it'll be. I think Pereira wins the first round, then Wonder Boy takes back round 2, and then comfortably wins round 3.
I could possibly see a 10-8 for Wonder Boy in round 3 if Pereira is as
Yeah,
gassed as what he could potentially be.
that is true. Yeah, it could be a draw that way even.
Yep.
But I do think I agree 10,000% with you. I think the longer this fight goes, Wonder Boy is just gonna keep winning, which will make my friend Cameron happy. He's still relatively new to MMA. I've been trying to dip him into the hardcore, so fountains, I guess you could say, and Wonder Boy is his early pick as his favorite.
Good call. Smart
A
man.
fantastic guy, fantastic,
Yep.
great ambassador for the sport.
I will say I always love talking to sort of like new to me MMA fans because I'll always ask them like who their favorite fighter is, and based on who they say, I can tell how much of a diehard they are. Because I used to work with this lady, and she followed MMA, and I said, "Who's your favorite fighter?" And expecting like Connor or Paddy or something like that. Rose Namajunas, and I thought,
Fantastic pick.
you know your stuff.
Yeah, that's my family. Whenever I hear them talk about fighters, I can usually tell how much they've been watching. And shout out to my Aunt Emerald. She's fantastic and hilarious. And she was laughing at me because I used to talk about how attractive I thought Joanna was. And the next family get together I saw, she runs up to me and she goes like, "So how did your boogie woman do, huh?" Because and then she was like, "Oh, I love Rose so much because of that fight." I'm like, "Yep, thanks." And it was like a couple days after, so I knew she had to have watched it. And I was like, "I'm glad you watched it at least."
I will say, just going off on a tangent, someone asked me what my favorite INC video was, and it didn't get many views. It's probably the Joanna retrospective. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah, me too. I really like that one. I was really hoping you would say my debut on INC Live. That's a little hurtful, I guess. But yeah, we'll move on.
We shall
No, I'm
move on. We shall move on. We're going to the welterweight division now, and it is the number 12 seed, Michael Chiesa, who is taking on the unranked Kevin Holland. Despite this, however, Holland is the bookmaker's favourite, -150 to +130 for Chiesa. Now, this is the first time that Michael Chiesa has fought since a loss to Sean Brady back in November 2021. Now, since then, Chiesa has had a lot of media commitments. He's usually on the desk for the UFC these days. So, bearing this in mind, they sort of carved out this sort of second career for himself. Are you a bit surprised to see him back at all?
No, I've been waiting for him to come back. Admittingly, I'm a Chiesa fan, so I've been praying and waiting for him to come back. Because I thought if he would have beaten Luque, he was
Yes.
he was right there, And but that fight's also incredible. That's one of the most action-packed back and forth fights for like the 2 minutes it's there. But yeah, Chiesa, he's kind of fun to me at 170. Because he feels like a stronger version of himself than he was at 155. He does struggle to get finishes a little bit more at welterweight, probably because of the strength to strength style of submission attempts he goes for. I feel like, but he's I was really thinking he was gonna just right there, and I know the Sean Brady fight annoyed him a good amount as well, but man, I'm actually kind of stunned he's the underdog here.
There's very few guys, in my opinion, who can make a grappling heavy style entertaining. I do put Chiesa in that bracket. I do enjoy watching him fight. He's sort of... he's not sort of like a scrambler in the same way that someone like Tim Elliott is, but I just love his persistent, his doggedness.
He's relentless in there to me.
I mean,
he's like a much more entertaining Darren Elkins to me.
That's a good comparison, actually.
Yeah.
Because Elkins will make it sort of like dirty and grimy on the feet and then try and chase you to get you to the ground.
And then when he gets you to the ground, he kind of stalls on you a little bit, which is always like my only entertaining complaint of Darren Elkins. But Chiesa, when he's on top of you, he's moving. He's moving and grooving, trying to work, trying to do what he can. Like like I mean, it broke my heart. But his Carlos Condit fight, he worked constantly against Condit, who's also very active from the bottom as well. But I like watching Chiesa. I'm a fan. I'm a good fan of his.
Yeah. And what would you say are Chiesa's biggest strengths?
He seems pretty like he seems pretty strong at welterweight still. I don't know if he'll have the strength advantage in this fight since he's fighting someone who was a former middleweight and he is a former lightweight. But he seems pretty strong at welterweight. He's all like we said before, just relentless in his attack. In the clinch, he's always looking for the trip or he's looking to get the takedown. He's also kind of smart on how he attacks or how he wants to get you to the ground. So I think the example is looking at how he took down Al Iaquinta in the tough finale that won him tough. And then in his prior fight before that, which was James Vick. So against James Vick, the long, lankier fighter, I think he shot a low single and was able to get him down. And it's really easy to get under the center of gravity of the taller fighter. And he was able to kind of adjust his shot to get him down. And then with Al Iaquinta, I think he got him down in the clinch. Like he was able, because he's the taller guy in that fight and the stronger, bigger guy in that fight. And he just kind of muscled him down. And I think that is really interesting. Usually you'll see like a lot of grapplers that are like in the mid-level. Like a mid-level wrestler will say they have their one way of taking a guy down that they like. And if that isn't working, they'll still try it 4 or 5 times. And then they'll look at some other way. Chiesa, usually his first attempt works. If not, he has a second way or a third way. Like he's very good at attacking, taking the fight to the ground in a multitude of ways, I think.
And he is also very good at getting people to give up the back. And that's become a real X factor in MMA in recent years.
Ferocious back taker. Absolutely.
Yeah. There are, however, struggling to get my words out here. That's one problem when you speak to a microphone is you sort of have 2 words which you're sort of choosing between which one to use, and you end up using sort of like an amalgamation of the 2. So it just sounds like nonsense. There are
right
2 pieces to this puzzle, however, and we're going to talk about the second one here, which is Kevin Holland, 24-9 record. He is back in the winners column by beating your boy, Santiago Ponzinibbio, UFC 287. And bearing in mind where Kevin Holland sort of like came to the public conscious, which was not getting the contract on the Contender Series, apparently, based on what you hear, making a pass to Laura Sanko, then getting signed to the UFC is basically a punishment when he got put up against Thiago Santos. Since then, though, wins over Ponzi, Tim Means, Cowboy Oliveira, Jacare, Buckley, Fluffy Hernandez, GM3, and back on the regional scene, Jeff Neal. It's been a really colourful career, bearing in mind where he started.
Oh, yeah. He was actually my fighter of the year in 2020.
Oh, he was amazing that year.
Yeah, he was the star. It was a horrible time to live in, and having fights on almost a weekly basis was like one of the few like entertaining things that was ongoing outside of like video games or streaming The Sopranos for the 5th time, and which I will never complain about that. But yeah, he was fantastic, and it all started because he hit on Laura Sanko. So he has a man of culture because Laura Sanko is a beautiful woman. I love my girlfriend to death. And if something were to happen, Laura Sanko, I would love if she comforted me while I was going through that tragedy of that being said, yeah, he's back in the winner's column, breaking my heart. But man, he's good. Like, he's very good fighter.
Yeah, and I think the welterweight move has been a big help for him. Because I did think he was a little bit undersized for middleweight. I do think there's some advantages there. I think that the power maybe carries quite well at a higher weight, but it seems to have... He doesn't seem to have lost any of his pep by dropping down to welterweight. I think he's got good size and range there. And I would be interested to see when it comes to Chiesa's going to try his best to make this a grappling heavy fight and exploit the sort of limitations that Holland seemed to show as a middleweight. But people forget this guy is a black belt under Travis Lutter. He knows
Yeah.
some things on the ground, so I would be interested to see how he would fare against a welterweight grappler.
Yeah, because against like, the Marvin Vittoris and Derek Brunsons who just laid and preyed on him for 3 rounds, he kind of, in my opinion at least, he kind of just, like couldn't. They were just too big for him to do anything. Too big and too strong. So I think that was like a size difference. And I hate bringing this up because of who it is, but uh, against Hamzat, no one's been able to do anything off their back against that guy
Yeah.
yet.
Well, he's not a proper welterweight. Doesn't
Yeah,
count.
but Paulo Costa is gonna, could potentially punch him into Secret Juice formula. So, um, that's. I hope that fight happens. Oh, that sounds so much fun. But um, so it is interesting to see how he deals with this aggressive grappler that isn't, like a middleweight in welterweight's clothing, so to speak, or just an outright huge middleweight like Vittori, and Brunson seems like a bigger size middleweight to me as well. So that is interesting. I feel like he has that black belt. I feel like I've never seen it.
I
Like I
do
think that
remember covering a video. I was doing a video, I think it was like fighters you never knew fought in Bellator, and it included Kevin Holland, and he submitted his opponent off his back. And that's like the
yeah,
only time I've really properly seen it in one of his fights.
it seems like it's kind of like Vanderlei Silva's black belt. Like Vanderlei Silva, by all accounts, is a very high level jiu-jitsu guy, according to like people that have like trained with him and stuff. But he has a black belt. And when was the last time you saw him use it? Like he just kind of uses it defensively on the ground, and then like it's kind of the same way with Kevin Holland, but I feel like to a much or lesser extent as well. It's like I don't. I think outside of I've never even seen that fight. I watched the video about it when he was in Bellator, but I mean, outside of like when he gets submissions, he's usually hurting a guy, then chasing the submission. Like Tim Means, you know, and it's never like he's never like really working for it and getting it himself. Like he's never snatching it. But we did see a little bit of his defensive grappling against Dirty Cowboy Alex Oliveira.
I love that. I love that. That's your nickname for him.
That's technically Jack Slack's nickname for him because he cheats in every fight. And I was like, no, he doesn't, does he? And I watched like a bunch of Alex Oliveira fights, and I was like, yeah, he cheats in every fight. Holy God, holy hell! Like, wow, he's a dirty cheater. It's awesome.
I
Sure.
think one of the big X factors when it comes to this fight could be the footwork battle, because that's something that seems to have tripped up Kevin Holland in a lot of his previous fights. When he has the better footwork, he's very good at controlling range and setting up his power shots. But when he doesn't, that's when the overhands start coming in. That's when he starts getting a little bit reckless. So if Chiesa is able to frustrate him on the feet by not giving him these opportunities to throw, then it's going to create the opportunities for Chiesa to take him down and control the fight. So I am interested to see how that happens because, I mean, Kevin Holland has the power to put out Michael Chiesa.
Absolutely.
It's just whether or not he's going to have the opportunity to do it.
That's a really good point you made there. I don't really consider Kevin Holland a very good, I guess we'll call it back striker off his back foot, like a back foot striker. He doesn't really seem that way to me. He seems like he wants to kind of create that pace of his own and then land the shot. And then, okay, now we're here. Like now I'm the aggressor. I don't really see him being the guy who's, knocking guys off his back foot. Like he's a little too wild whenever that happens. And I mean, that is what made the Wonder Boy fight just spectacular, but on the same hand, might not be that way against a guy who's just a relentless wrestler.
Which way are you going for this one?
I got Chiesa by decision. I wouldn't be surprised if he submits him. I see this fight kind of being a little similar to the Hamzat fight, just not as dominant. I think he'll probably get him to the ground pretty early and take him down. That said, if Kevin Holland shows that he can stuff a takedown, Chiesa, one issue I like this about him, but it's not a great habit, is Chiesa will just be like, all right, I'll just go punch in then. And his striking leaves his chin up in the air.
Yes.
And if he can't get the takedown, he's going to try and strike to set it up, sadly. And that is where the bomb can, land.
I have the same sort of consensus overall. I am picking Chiesa to win this one. There are a couple of sort of exclamation marks, asterisks as it were, which is
Hmm.
obviously the striking battle. I think Kevin Holland's going to have the advantage there. But also as well, I think Chiesa can be a little bit complacent when he can underestimate the grappling ability of his opponent sometimes. We have seen him be submitted. Like, he underestimated Luque, got submitted. Underestimated Pettis, got submitted. If Kevin Holland does show this black belt that everyone's been sort of like building up and bigging up for years, could we possibly see another situation? Holland being a little bit better off his back than some people give him credit for.
I think like the big thing too in those fights is Chiesa got that happened. Not so much in the Luque fight. He got knocked to the ground and then they went to the or he got punched and then when they went to the ground. But I could definitely see that, but I don't think so. I consider Luque and Pettis a different level of grappler than Kevin Holland. But like I said, I've never seen the black belt, so I could be writing it off and underestimating it myself. So
Fight number 3, and we're going down to the lightweight division here. And it used to be a couple of years ago that people would see this guy's name and be like, yes, it's Tony time. These days it's, oh no, it's Tony time.
it's Tony time.
Which is a really sad sort of introduction to this. It is Tony Ferguson taking on Bobby Green. Ferguson comes into this one as a plus 265 underdog. You can get Bobby Green at minus 345. I'll start with some of the positives about this fight. I've always been a believer that the UFC, when it comes to these sort of aging veterans, people like the Tony Fergusons, the Bobby Greens, Clay Guidas, Tim Means of the world, it's best to put them against other aging veterans rather than trying to feed them to a prospect. So I am glad that the UFC are doing this with Tony Ferguson. With that being said, though, should this fight be happening at all? Because what I've seen from Tony Ferguson in his past couple of fights, it's starting to get a little bit sad watching him.
Yeah, I will defend him in one regard. I thought he pieced up Michael Chandler in their first round.
Yes.
And then I black out in the beginning of the second round. But so oh, man, that highlight I hate it. I hate watching highlights and I have to watch that. And I'm like, no, I don't want to watch this. Can I skip this? Painful for me. In the Nate Diaz fight, he just looked way too slow. He didn't look like himself at all at welterweight. So at least he's got lightweight, which might help out, but I don't know. I don't know if this fight should happen again.
My only defense of the Nate Diaz fight is, yes, again, another veteran versus veteran fight. And also, bearing in mind what the UFC wanted to do with Nate, it was a big sort of two fingers up to them, and it was also a big two fingers up to Hamzat for being an unprofessional meathead and nearly getting the card cancelled.
Yeah, it was Nate winning was a pretty nice fingers up moment, I think, to the UFC and to everything, but it did suck that Tony had to be a victim in that.
Yes.
He was a casualty still. But I don't know if I want this fight happening. I hold Tony Ferguson in such high regard. He's one of my favorite fighters ever, and it just isn't there.
Let's look at Tony Ferguson in a bit more detail, though. Let's try and remember some of the happy things about Tony Ferguson. So it's a 25-8 record, and his portfolio of lightweights and welterweights as well, because he started his career at welterweight, he's up there as some of the best. Donald Cerrone, Anthony Pettis, Kevin Lee, RDA, Edson Barboza, Josh Thompson, Gleison Tebow, and Eve Edwards. So those are some of the top lightweights in the world. He's arguably one of the best fighters to never win a proper UFC title outright.
Yeah, he's my pick for the best fighter to never win the real belt. He never even got a shot at the real belt. He was one of those guys that got hosed over because of Conor McGregor title bureaucracy shenanigans. Whenever he should have been in that spot, like him and Habib had some struggles trying to get a title fight for a while. It was interim this, interim that, interim this, and then when they finally did it, here comes the catastrophic knee injury because that matchup is cursed. And then here comes a multitude of issues, and then the matchup gets cursed again, and then he cuts weight for it twice. which I think ruined his career. But his record and resume, he is, in my opinion, in terms of pure ability, probably the best welterweight or best lightweight ever. Maybe like it's him or BJ in terms of pure ability. Like no legacy, just the fighter in the cage who's the best. Like the eye test. Tony Ferguson or Prime BJ Penn for me.
There's something very throwback I feel about Tony. I think that's why
Yeah,
he's fans endear to him so much. There is something that's that sort of old school 2003, 2004 sort of era UFC.
absolutely. I can definitely see that. He's he feels like a fighter from another era that is beating guys from this era, for a while. A lot of wild spin techniques. Why? Because they're cool, a lot of dumb training things that you go, why are you doing that? And now we know better than to do stupid stuff like this. But then he wins, and you see some benefits of it, like him kicking steel pipes. Like, well, come on, there's way better things you can do than that. And then he actively kicks the opponent's shins when they look to low kick him back. Like, okay, you see some of the things. Why are you doing Wing Chun? Wing Chun might not even be all that applicable in MMA. And it's like, oh no, he has some of the best hand fighting into hand trapping into then roll over elbows ever. Instead of a back fist, he's implementing his elbows. Like, oh, this guy's great. And like he just feels like an old school guy. Like he's one of those like John Jones before he had the title. Everyone was saying like this unorthodox striker and wrestler is going to take over the world. And Tony Ferguson, I felt, took that idea and added way more insanity to it. And that's what we have all these highlights of. Like one of my favorite moments in MMA history is Tony going for a spinning elbow on RDA, and RDA it misses. RDA just goes no. Then Tony throws another one right after and lands it, and then he goes yeah. It's just amazing.
I mean, you could just picture Tony wearing like the Death Clutch t-shirt and drinking his like Pitbull energy drink.
Absolutely. I can see him like definitely drinking like those Mickeys, on the Ultimate Fighter. And to think he's been around for a while, but like it still doesn't feel like out of place era from where he's from. He's from the post Tough 10 era, like when they first, redid the training center they do Tough in, the Tough House and all that. And they first like redid it all. And he's from that same season where Brock Lesnar called his team chicken and tried to turn it into chicken salad, Um, so, I mean, like he feels like he's more from the like Tough 2, 3, and 4 era.
Do you think that part of the issue that Tony has had is him still trying to capture that sort of old school Tony style? Do you think maybe changing things up to try and cater to his sort of advanced years might be something that might get him a victory here?
I think so. I think he needs to be a little bit more wily. I think the hard part is he is such a natural athlete. Like if you look at his like life story, he was like a multi-level or multi-high level athlete in high school and chose wrestling because I think he had scholarships offer for like baseball, basketball, and football as well. But then he took the wrestling one because he just liked it more, scholarship as well. And so he was like a mega athlete, and his style primarily used his athleticism style work. So him slowing down means the style just isn't there. Like he's a very technical striker, sort of. He's a little too wild, and his athleticism helped smooth that edge out. He's a very technical grappler, but I think he's almost too stubborn to change his style, sadly. And I think if he kind of took a more methodical, slower natured approach to cater to where his athleticism is, he could, have this not necessarily comeback, but he would have a lot more success, I think, now.
And I bring this up because his opponent, Bobby Green, in my opinion, he's a veteran that has done the right things to try and prolong his career. Because, like Bobby Green has always been sort of like a fighter's fighter. He's been around for like goodness knows how many years. He fought in Strikeforce, but it wasn't really until I'd probably say around the pandemic time where he was another one like Kevin Holland who was fighting quite regularly, and I think he got like 4 or 5 wins in a row fighting on these Apex cards. And a lot of people started realizing, hey, Bobby Green's fighting this weekend. He seems like a fun guy. He's somebody who he's done the right things. He's done what Tony hasn't done to try and carve out this sort of like niche as an aging veteran.
Just being like using his mind first. Like he, I think like one of the best fights to showcase like, hey, how good is Bobby Green now is the Fiziev fight. Like he loses that fight. I think he lost it. That said, he fought a hell of a fight and he put the fear of God in Fiziev in that last round and just outthought him almost. Like he just better cardio because, and he fought very conservatively and smart to minimize his damage, then tried taking advantage of it and he just couldn't get the finish. But like he's smooth. He still has like a very smooth striking style, in terms of like his head movement and everything like that. Like Drew Dober had a hard time getting a hold of him. When he did, we saw what happened. But Drew Dober usually does that to people when he hits them like that. And he just kind of like he just knows how to fight with where his athleticism is because he was in a similar boat to Tony. It's almost like this is what Tony should have done. Yes. Is what he's kind of fighting.
I do think there are some concerns I do have with Bobby Green, which is, like, we talk about father time when it comes to Tony, but Bobby Green is, 36, 37 years old. And bearing in mind that his fighting style, it's very sort of hands down. You don't know when the punches are coming because you can't see, so like the defense, that sort of thing. It can work offensively, but when you don't have the reflexes to get your hands up to block the shots, that becomes a bit of a concern. So I am concerned about whether Bobby Green is still going to be able to react to the sort of big punches when they come. I don't think it's going to be an issue with Tony because I don't think Tony's that sort of one-shot striker in the way that someone like Drew Dober is. But also as well, I've always said that Bobby Green is sort of a bit of a mindset fighter. He's somebody who needs to have that self-confidence and belief. And once he gets one win, he can rack up 2, 3, 4. But we've got a guy who's winless in his past 3. One of those was a non-contest against Jared Gordon.
Yep.
There may be some self-doubts there. There may be a little bit of a lack of confidence. And that does snowball when it comes to Bobby Green. Like, I've seen Bobby Green where he can look like a world beater. And other times when he's struggling to beat some quite low-level competition.
He at one point, think about this to remember, to help with your point there, is he stopped Iaquinta, retired him. Then he beat, I had his name just a second ago to remember it. I cannot remember how to, Nasrat H. I cannot remember how to pronounce it. Hakparast. Yeah. See, my poor
Skinny
Southern American tongue. Yeah, actually looks just like him. My poor Southern American tongue just ain't got that kind of movement. But he was going to fight Makhachev like on like 1 week notice, and people went, he might actually be hot enough to take out Makhachev. It didn't happen, but he had us believing that, and he was confident enough to kind of make that, feel. And like he definitely has, when he's hot, the world knows it, and it affects things, This one though, I think this is Bobby Green's fight to lose. I think he's probably going to walk away with a win here.
I'm in the same boat. I don't know if it's going to be by knockout or if it's going to be by decision. I'm leaning towards decision. I don't think Bobby Green has that sort of one-shot power to put away Tony Ferguson. But I just don't think Tony has it there anymore.
Yeah. And I think if it goes to the ground, Tony wins, though.
Yes.
Tony can't finish him on the ground. For sure.
But Bobby Green does have that sort of wrestling base himself. Like, he doesn't... Yeah. He uses it mainly defensively, but Bobby Green's very hard to take down these days.
That's what was so impressed about the Makachev thing, him just taking him down pretty easily. But um, I think if it does go to the ground, it'll be it'll be Bobby taking Tony down, just to like maybe to alleviate some pressure from himself. But who knows? I think that's the only chance Tony has is like an extended grappling exchange. But I think this is Bobby's fight to win.
And the worst part is, if this was to happen, it goes the way that we think it's going to go, if the bookmakers think it's going to go. That's Tony Ferguson, this great, legendary fighter. 6 losses in a row. And I think there's only ever been 5 fighters who've done that in the UFC. And I think that it's Sam Alvey, BJ Penn, Phil Baroni, Elvis Sinisic, and then Hector Lombard. Six losses in a row.
There's only one thing to do if you're Tony Ferguson if you lose this fight. You gotta shut down any union talks around you. That's the only way Sam Alvey did it.
I thought you were going to say fight Phil Baroni.
Well, I'd still watch that because I don't like Phil Baroni. I don't think anybody
likes Phil Baroni.
Yeah, there's a reason I didn't bring him up very well in that retro review recently. I was like, he got knocked out here, and I almost said good, but I didn't. I didn't want to even give him that time of day.
You're gonna have a field day if you have to cover James Krause.
Oh my god, I know. Yeah, I'm gonna have a blast with it. But there is that Laura Sanko rumor, so
There's a lot of rumors surrounding Glory. There's a lot of stories.
Yeah.
It's basically Coronation Street in that training camp.
Yeah, they were a really good gym, but wow, and James Krause was a boy of mine, but then wow, did they lose all that favor with me?
Fascinating stuff. And we'll probably cover it in an INC video at some point. We'll just need to wait and see what happens with the legalities. So before we get ourselves into trouble, we're going to talk about the core main event here. We're going up to the light heavyweight division, and it's Jan Blachowicz who is taking on the newcomer to the weight class, Alex Pereira. Now, I think one of the good things about MMA is how different the fan bases can be. Some fighters can like certain fighters, some fighters can dislike them. Usually there's general consensus, but sometimes you go against the grain when it comes to certain people. And I bring this up because I don't like Alex Pereira. Which, and before you get the pitchforks out, I understand that's something that a lot of people don't agree with, but it doesn't sit well with me that I've seen a lot. I'm somebody who favors meritocracy. I like to see fighters build up 4 or 5 fight winning streaks to earn the big opportunities, the title fights. And it just doesn't sit well with me to see him fast-tracked to a title match. And all credit in the world to him. He did beat Adesanya fair and square, so I don't hold that against him. But I think that opportunity should have gone to somebody who'd earned it a little bit more than him. But also as well, you're a 36-year-old man who for the past decade has gotten these kicks out of being a professional troll. And even though I don't like Izzy, I find a lot of his behaviour quite cringe, I'm just a bit like, act your age.
Yeah. I think it's hilarious that a man, I'm a big fan of the Chappelle Show from back in the day. And there's a skit on there where they talk about the player haters ball. It's all the people who are the biggest haters in the world. I think Alex Pereira could be in that club because he has devoted his entire life into just trying to be better than Izzy at everything ever. And it's hilarious and just, it's so funny to me that this is what this grown man is deciding to do with his life. And I think that is hilarious. Well, Izzy beat me in the last fight. You know who also beat him, though? Jan Blachowicz. I'm going to beat Jan Blachowicz just because Izzy couldn't. Okay.
And I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC booked this match before that reason.
I think so, too. I think they're feeding this behavior.
As I mentioned before, I'm not really a big Adesanya fan. I completely understand why Adesanya behaved the way he did after that finish.
Yeah. Well, I people had a little bit of a problem with it. I was like, I just think it's cringy like most things Adesanya does. And then I was like, him going after his kid was weird though. Then I remembered his kid, Pereira's son, that same child, was doing the, Masvidal thing of like stiffening up and falling in the ring when they were in Glory, when Pereira knocked him out in Glory. And I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I don't condone this, but F that kid. Like that's, like I totally get it. I don't like Izzy either, but the longer time has passed from that fight, the more I'm like, good for him. Good for him.
And the other thing that Alex Pereira taking this fight has done is it's added another sort of wrinkle of chaos around the light heavyweight division. Ever since John Jones vacated that belt, and there's a lot of question marks about why John did it. I personally have my own suspicions. It's just been a mess. And in some ways, that can be a good thing for a weight class when you don't have... It's sort of like when the lid's off the basket, are the crabs going to roam free? And sometimes that can be fantastic for a weight class. This is the opposite, though, where we have the sort of... We can have some good matches. I mean, Glover versus Yuri is up there as one of the best fights of the past 5 years. Amazing fight. But it just seems very chaotic because obviously Jan held the belt for a short space of time and then Glover took it off him, and Glover, a 42-year-old who's beaten all these youngsters, does that sort of knock it back a bit. Jamal Hill getting the belt when a lot of people didn't think he deserved it. It's a bit chaotic, and not the good kind of chaotic.
Yeah, it's odd. It's like we talked about this in the last preview show, how flyweight has exploded post Mighty Mouse.
Yeah.
And this is the inverse of that. Really, Dominic Reyes, I'm going to call it out here. Dominic Reyes ruined this division because he scared John Jones away forever. I'm convinced that's what happened. Dominic Reyes put the fear of God in John Jones, and John Jones says there isn't enough cocaine in the world for me to take this fight again, and left. That's my theory.
Not so much Dom Reyes himself, but what Dom Reyes represented, the new breed which was catching up.
Absolutely, because Jan beat up pretty bad Dominic Reyes, and John Jones was sitting there shivering when he saw that. And then here comes Yuri. Glover is really good. Glover somehow gotten better at 42. Jamala Hill's here. It's like, oh no. It was just
Ankalaev.
Yeah. A Rakic and Ankalaev is probably in this mix at 205 still. And it very interesting, how all these names show up. And it's kind of created a weird standstill because of, I theorized that division is cursed last week on the recap show. That title seems cursed. It feels like you can't hold it without something bad happening. And it's kind of created a bit of a standstill, essentially. But I feel it's really coincidental that all these big names that are showing up that have been, really tearing it up, this new guard, and John Jones is like, does anyone want to fight at heavyweight? So, but another fan base down. I gotta make my enemies how I choose them.
I'm trying to think who. You just need to slag off Khabib, and then you'll have ticked all the boxes.
If I technically have one more till bingo. I'm trying to get my bingo, and I have to fit in a Valentino one. And then I have bingo diagonal. My fan base is kind of annoyed.
You're okay with that, Slacky the Lava? You've covered it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I should get it by fair. In fairness, Valentina at this point, because she's not champion, feels like a free square. It is 6:40 a.m. and I still got it. Oh.
I am visually seeing all of the downforce for this video when I upload it.
I want to stress to all the fans out there of all different fighters. I love most of you.
Yes.
Most. The ones I don't love, I'll never tell.
Yeah, I've always been the belief that there's nothing wrong with sort of having likes or dislikes when it comes to fighters. As long as you can sort of frame it in the right way and just not be a hater about it.
Yeah, for me, it's all humor. I'm just playfully joking. If I didn't joke with you, if I or like that's my I always tell people because I'm a clown. I like to joking with people in real life, and I always tell people if I joke with you, that means I like you. And then without fail, someone goes, "Is that why you don't joke with?" Yes, it is. That's why I don't joke with that person.
Let,
I have that's how it is.
let's try and get this back on tangent here. Let's talk about the fight in a bit more detail here. So Alex Pereira is taking on Jan Blachowicz, 29-9 record. He also has the one draw, which was his last fight up against Ankalaev. We talked about that back in January when we talked
Yeah.
about Glover versus Jamal Hill. That you personally thought that Ankalaev did enough to win that fight. I
Mhm.
personally thought that Jan did enough to win the first 3 rounds, and personally, I thought that a draw was the right result because there was 10 for Ankalaev in that last round.
I thought I scored it a draw as well.
Oh, sorry.
I think we're both on the same page because I thought Jan was comfortably winning until the fifth round.
Yeah. Um, but Jan is back into the title mix here potentially because I've got the feeling that whoever wins this fight is going to fight Yuri by the end of the year. I see that
Mm.
being that will either headline the January card, or if they don't get Connor and Chandler together, that headlines December. Yuri
So
versus the winner of
December.
this.
So December. That fight's never happening.
Yeah. And we talked earlier on about Tony Ferguson being like 39 years old and really being sort of like a shadow of his former self. Jan Blachowicz is 40 years old and still seems to be performing at a really good level. Do you think this is just the benefits that come with fighting at a higher weight, or do you think there's something that has he sort of worked around sort of the issues of father time to get this sort of knack for himself? Like, how has Jan Blachowicz gone from being a guy who would have been cut if he lost to Devin Clark to being a former champion?
I have a theory about this. And so if you look at the ages of fighters at heavyweight and light heavyweight, then you you notice that the average age of fighters is significantly higher usually as you go up. And I think a lot of that is because uh, athleticism is great at those weight classes, but it isn't too common. So when your athleticism is failing, you can kind of get away with a lot of that. And those weight classes also historically aren't that technical. So, you know, having just essentially old man strength can kind of carry you. Those in like the young guard isn't always coming in to just, you know, take over essentially. It's very odd when like I can't remember the last time the new guard. I think like both divisions have a new guard kind of coming in, but it's not that big compared to like I imagine in 2 years time, featherweight and lightweight, and like all those lower divisions have like a whole new cast of
Yes.
top 10 guys, you know. Whereas I feel like in 2 years time, Tai Tuivasa is still going to be like number 8, you know, and it just I feel like age is merely a number at these higher weight classes in a weird way. Um, I think what's more important is the number of fights and experience someone has at these upper weight classes. Like we mentioned Derek Lewis earlier. We brought up his age, but I brought up like how he's coming up on 40 fights. That with his age, like, okay, like that's the 40 fights is the bigger one for me.
Do you think you need to be a smarter fighter at the heavier weights as well because the risk is so much higher?
I I say that, but I think it would be more important. But I also feel like intelligence can take you farther because uh, I are the two greatest. You and me differ on opinion on who the greatest heavyweight is, but I think the one constant between our two picks of Stipe and Fedor is their intelligence. They were incredibly smart and adaptable fighters, and we wouldn't. I think we both them having that level of in ring fight IQ helped carry them to that even higher level of greatness to where when people talk about the greatest heavyweights ever, people put those two usually at the very top, you know. So I think intelligence takes you much further in the higher weight classes than it does at the lower weight classes because call me crazy and I don't need to disrespect either weight class. I feel like fighters fight much more intelligently at the fighter weight classes naturally, whereas at heavyweight, for example, like poor dude, Parker Porter's fighting, and against Harry Hunsucker, it's like, what are they going to do? The most rudimentary, basic techniques and what's it called? Like it's not going to be the most intellectual chessboard esque match, as if we saw, like Matt Schnell fight or like a Matt Schnell fight at like or something like that. And it's but I feel so there's less intelligence I feel like used at the higher divisions, but if you do have it, it is a huge attribute to have, and that's like something Jan has. I think Jan, he's fighting smarter as he's gotten older, and he's kind of catered his style around, what he needs to do with his, like, kind of similar to what we saw with Bobby Green. Bobby Green is fighting a style that fits with his current athleticism, and Jan's been doing that for a while. Like, he's been fighting herky-jerky and using his biggest physical attribute, which is his strength, to the fullest level.
And he needs to be smart as well, because surely, bearing in mind Alex Pereira's question marks over his grappling, he's surely going to try and take this fight to the ground.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I have it here. The last time I saw Jan Blachowicz do something stupid, like outright stupid, was the Thiago Santos fight when he rushed him. And this fight could be that way. That's kind of how I feel. Like, I think I could see that scenario happening if he decides to just, why not? But I think this is going to be a lot of grindy wrestling. That's at least that's what the game plan should be, in my mind. Because there's a big difference between a very good striker, a-la, Dominic Reyes, Alexander Rakic, Johnny Walker. Like, there's a difference between those level strikers and then a glory kickboxing guy that has found a way to convert his style pretty decently well into MMA.
And the guy who at 205 isn't going to have the durability issues that he did at middleweight.
Oh, yeah.
So that it's a big concern for me. Like, if I was a Jan Blachowicz fan, I would be concerned. Like, Alex Pereira, he has that off button. He has that power in a way that not a lot of fighters in the UFC do. And even though I do have severe question marks over how good his grappling is, I mean, Israel Adesanya took him down. And Izzy has never been known as a great grappler by any means. So Jan, who has a history of grappling, we saw him beat Krylov by basically wrestling him and then getting a submission. So Jan is capable of taking this fight to the ground, and I think if he does, he could make very comfortable work of Alex there. My concern is he going to be able to do that, or is Pereira going to find that off switch against a 40-year-old guy who has been rocked and dropped before?
Yeah, he's been KO'd before. I think of this fight a little bit similar as to the Izzy fight with Jan. Because Izzy is probably around the same level of striker as Pereira. I think that's very fair to say. If not, either they're equal or Izzy's better striker, in my opinion, but in terms of technique. But Pereira has, like, the most magical level of power I've ever seen in a fighter have. Like, because his isn't just timing. Like, Conor McGregor is one, I dislike the guy and, and all that noise. We all like rag on him constantly, but Conor McGregor has one of the best timings I've ever seen in a fighter. But he didn't have the mega bomb, concentrated, Oppenheimer-esque power in his fists like in Jose Aldo. Pereira seems like a mix of both of those guys. Like, he has that Oppenheimer power with that Barbie timing. And it's just, it's an interesting one. And it's funny I say that this fight kind of has me on edge, because I actually consider Pereira to technically be the worst champion ever. He's technically the worst champion ever in terms of as a fighter. Like, this guy got a belt? Like, he can't wrestle at all. His grappling is literally zero. Yeah. Favorable matchmaking will do that, you know? But it's interesting. I think, oh, man, we said it with Tony Ferguson earlier, how Tony Ferguson's kind of a throwback guy. Alex Pereira seems like a throwback guy. Alex Pereira seems like a guy we would see in Pride, the
Yes,
one touch
very
of death
Pride.
KO. Yeah, he's very Pride-esque to me. And no grappling whatsoever. But for some reason, here he is to one-shot KO everybody. Like, almost like Mark Hunt, Melvin Manhoefy, in a sense. And but somehow scarier than both. Like, he has that, like, fearsome aura to him.
Do you think working with Glover could possibly be an advantage? Because Glover did have that win over Jan back in UFC 267. Now, admittedly, Glover did that using a grappling-based game, which I don't expect to see from Alex Pereira. But do you think some of the tips and tricks that Glover used to gain the advantage, do you think that could maybe apply in this?
I'm sure that if I remember correctly, Glover took him down pretty early. There was very little striking setup. So if there was a little bit more striking setup for the takedowns and the grappling, I would be like, oh, what's it called? Glover probably goes, oh, hey, like, he likes the uppercut when he's doing this. He was doing this. Remember? Because it's one thing to watch tape. It's another thing to be in there all together. But I don't think there was enough striking in there for him to give him a ton of clues. But he can definitely tell him, hey, I took him down, but this guy is this kind of strong, or he's not that strong here. Like, his strength, he doesn't know how to apply it when I have him here. So remember that. Like, it would be really funny to see Pereira fight him exactly like Glover, come out double legging him. I would start dying laughing, but I don't know how much the Glover thing helps.
Time to put your money where your mouth is. Which way are you going with this one? Because this is the one that is splitting a lot of people. This is basically, is Pereira going to get that big shot before Jan takes him down?
I think Jan gets a hold of him, Holly Holmes him for a little bit to build up the lactic acid in his body, takes him down, and just wears on him. It'll be similar to the Izzy fight, but much more ground-based, a lot less striking and feints. With Joe Rogan and everybody else on commentary going like, this is the thing we don't know about him for 3 rounds and I think it's a Jan decision, but a terrifying one.
Yeah.
It'll be one of those fights where I could see Jan winning comfortably, but at the end of it we go, oh, okay.
I'm going to be going a little against the grain. I am picking Alex Pereira. Because again, it's just that power, and against a 40-year-old guy, I think that's a big concern as well. I think other thing to bear in mind, we talked about altitude. Wrestling is going to take a lot out of you, especially if you're a guy that's not used to doing it. It was one of the reasons I feel like Adesanya lost the first fight, because you could tell Izzy was just knackered by the end of that 5th round. So I think that's maybe a concern for Jan, that if he does go grappling heavy, he's going to need a lot of cardio to try and get it done. And also as well, just obviously like it's almost like that meme from Breaking Bad with like Jesse with Alex Pereira. It's just like, he can't keep getting away with this.
Yeah,
I can see a situation where he finishes Jan without ever seeing the grappling get tested.
He can't keep. Remember in his debut fight, he got laid and prayed hard in round 1, and he just said F it and came out round 2 with a flying knee out of nowhere. Like, so I could see that happening. I'll bring this up to you. What if Jan, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think it is for Jan just to put that Polish power on that Pereira chin and finish it like that?
It's possible.
On the flip side.
I could see a situation where I could see something similar to Rockhold, where I see a little bit of wall installing, and as Jan breaks, then comes the big uppercut, because that sort of rage, that was where Izzy caught him in the first fight. That's where he finished him in the second fight. that sort of up against the fence, that sort of close quarters range, that has been a weakness for Pereira when it comes to striking.
Yeah, he hasn't. His stance is chin up, hands low because he wants to invite you in, and I wonder if that could get him caught. If like maybe a takedown fade into an uppercut or a left hand. I wonder if because I think both of these guys have that it factor and power, but I think there's just a difference in the Alex Pereira technique,
Yeah.
and power. Like he legitimately might be the pound for pound biggest hitter I've ever seen.
I'd
Like
personally go Carwin.
uh, Carwin, yeah, but he was a heavyweight, and there's something weird to me about a guy at middleweight who touches you, and like Sean Strickland went flying across, like he went flying across like the octagon to the point where I halfway expected Shawn Michaels to come out of nowhere and like super kick him Shelton Benjamin style with how much distance he got, and I think that is very telling. There's something weird about when he touches you. If he were to like, I feel like if he were to hit a heavy bag, it would just explode. I don't. There's something odd about it. Carwin has to be up there because Carwin had the biggest hands I've ever seen. They looked like the Hulk.
We're going to talk about our main event now. It is the BMF title, which is back up for grabs, which I'm sure everybody watching this is looking forward to. It is Dustin Poirier taking on Justin Gaethje, a rematch from their bout in 2018, which was one of the fights of the year. I think it was Nashville where it took place. So we're going from Nashville to Salt Lake City for these two matches. Betting odds for this one, you can get Dustin Poirier at -135. Justin Gaethje is +115. And we'll start with the question which I sort of brought up right at the start of the segment here, which is the reintroduction of the BMF belt, which I think it's safe to say that this is being used as a marketing tool by the UFC. They didn't have a title fight booked for the end of July and have sort of pulled this one out the woodwork to try and give it the sort of glitz and glamour that you would expect from a UFC pay-per-view main event. It worked first time around with Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz, but I think that was helped by having two guys who very casual friendly, Madison Square Garden, and it was always presented as a bit of fun, a little bit of silliness. This obviously doesn't have that. Is it going to be as effective as a marketing tool?
I really wonder because I myself wonder how big of a draw Justin and Dustin are. Like, how big are the Ustins like as a draw? Like, because Dustin I think has the Connor rub because he smashed Connor twice in a row. Okay, so does Justin have that like level of draw power? Because I mean Habib did really well because of the Connor rub. How does Dustin have that too historically? Um, and if like does Justin have that? Like has Justin? I think he's only main evented like 2 pay-per-views. So like I kind of wonder, does he have that kind of pull? So I'm really curious what the buy rate's going to be like for this one.
I've got some stats here in regards to like
But
pay-per-view buys.
ooh,
So Dustin
okay.
Poirier, post Connor, his only pay-per-view main event was against Charles Oliveira, UFC 269, which I think did about
Yeah.
500,000, about 500k.
Mhm.
Tony versus Justin Gaethje, I believe, was about 700 and 500 for Khabib. But you've got to bear in mind that they were pandemic cards, which on the whole they seem to
Mhm.
do better numbers because I think obviously people couldn't go anywhere else, so they just had to sort of like spend money on a pay-per-view because the UFC was pretty much the only game in town.
Yeah, and also look at the undercard on that Tony Justin card because that is probably my second favorite MMA card of like UFC card ever in terms of value and like just level of entertainment. I think that card is fantastic.
Greg Hardy versus Jorgen De
Um,
Castro.
yeah, that is fair though. You got me there.
You think you're
Uh,
special?
but
You do.
that's coming. I hope it does too. Fingers crossed. Uh, Going to be a hell of a challenge for you. But I think, funny enough, I wonder if they're going to bust out The Rock. Because remember, The Rock came out and, like he like gave the belt to Masvidal. But I wonder if that is going to help or hurt him or hurt their case, because you have Tanner Boser solidifying himself as a boy stable guy permanently for me, talking about how the Rock's shoes sucks and the sponsors suck. And you also have the box office beatdown, or let me rephrase this: the box office smackdown that Black Adam took. The box office and the fans unanimously turned that some bitch sideways, and
I'm not going to
I
criticize
only
the
bring up The
amount of
Rock. I
wrestling
feel
puns on
like
here. And also, as well, the XFL, that failed as
I,
well.
I yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Things not going
all
well
I'm
for poor
saying is
Dwayne
there's only
Johnson.
one way out of it. Like, things haven't been great for him. I think the biggest highlight of Dwayne Johnson recently is in the cameo I got from my friend Anthony. I got him a Boss Rutan cameo, and he talked about how much of a fan of The Rock he was in it. So that's probably the best thing to happen to The Rock for a while, is he still got Boss, El Wapo. But
Getting back on track here when
oh,
it
what's it
comes to
called?
this fight.
Yeah,
So one little
I
start, I was doing a little bit of research for this fight, and I found this start. I think one of the big MMA journalists, I don't know which one it was, posted this, but they said that since the first fight between Poirier and Gaethje, both of them have gone 4-2 in the UFC since, won the interim title, beat Michael Chandler, and their two losses came to Khabib and Charles Oliveira.
That's hilarious. I just not thought about those two losses, both by submission. Um, hmm.
So it's
This fight is going to be amazing.
It's going to be amazing. So I assume that you've done what I expect most people have done, which is rewatch the first fight. So what's your sort of memories from watching that one back? Was there anything that sort of you remembered differently? Things that you sort of like were really amplified this time around watching it again?
When Gaethje was eye poking Dustin, and Dustin was complaining about it, and Dustin literally just went in there and eye poked Justin Gaethje right back. I was dying laughing, and I realized how mad both these guys were, and I went, "We still have another round and a half to go. This fight is still that fight is still a 10 out of 10. Like, that is still a 10 out of 10 fight for me.
And I know we
Probably,
were planning to do a retro review. Unfortunately, it's not going to come out, but we were planning to do a retro review for
yeah,
a Dustin Poirier card. And there was a lot of people who were voting for the Gaethje fight.
because that fight's just that good. Like, honestly, probably my picks for the three most exciting guys ever, at the lower weight classes. I think Justin Gaethje's number one, but Dustin and Tony Ferguson got to be up there historically, because Dustin Poirier has a lot of, just, in my opinion, 10 out of 10 fights. The last two Connor fights for a sick reason, and but on the I think what this was the winner was Max Holloway too. That fight is, like, I think that fight's better than the Kelvin Izzy card for fight personally. Uh, and that fight is so good. But this fight should be incredible.
But we certainly hope
Because
so.
their first one is fantastic. Yeah, the first one's fantastic, and that is pre Gaethje going, all right, let me try to be a technical fighter, and him being dumb, and kind of, he just got caught. He got caught in this crazy back and forth fight. I think Dustin was always going to catch him. I know a lot of Trevor Whitman and Gaethje have said that, like, oh, I got complacent in there. He was complacent and he got caught. No, I think Dustin was always going to catch him. Dustin showed that he was just a little bit better defensively and was taking a lot less bombs than, a lot less clean hits than Justin was. Um, but the low kicks of Gaethje were doing good work in there. Uh, that fight's just it's so poetically beautiful. I could describe it like I'm writing poetry. It's like, oh, the pure violence ecstasy for me. It's beautiful stuff.
It's a
And I'm hoping
fantastic
this one
fight.
is
It is a
lives up.
fantastic fight.
Yeah,
And
I hope.
some of the technical limitations you sort of brought up with Justin Gaethje, because Gaethje was back then, he was his WSOF self. He was a little bit reckless. He liked to
Yeah,
try and make it these sort of like use the dirty boxing, target the kicks in the clinch, which was I think is one of his biggest weapons, is the way he targets his kicks. And we saw that especially with, in my opinion, like I've always been against the grain with a lot of people. I think Justin Gaethje's best fight was the Eddie Alvarez fight, because you saw Eddie like going after the
it's up there for
body
me.
and like really sort of like turning it up on Justin in those first 2 rounds, and then the kicks starting to add up, and this sort of what's going to break first. Is Gaethje going to be able to take all these headshots, or is Eddie going to reach the stage where he just can't take any more and has to go down to the ground? I love that sort of tension. But that Justin
Yeah,
Gaethje is a thing of the past. That's a relic of 2018. This guy now, he's a lot
yeah,
more
it's gone.
technical. He's still got that aggression. He's still got that power. And I'm interested to see how that plays up against Dustin, because I don't know about you. I feel like it's almost as if Dustin is, and if I'm wrong about this, and I do apologize, and there probably people will come back to me and say, oh, well, you got that one wrong, which we all do on these sort of prediction shows. I kind of feel like Dustin's taken his foot off the pedal a little bit. It was almost after the Charles Oliveira fight happened, and he lost that one. He almost sort of seems resigned to the fact that I'm not going to be champion, and I'm just going to go in to have like some entertaining fights and have a bit of fun. Whereas Justin, in my opinion, still has that hunger, and he showed that against Fizayev.
Yeah, he seems like Justin has outright said, he goes, I only got like 1 or 2 years left. I've been at this way too long and way too hard. He goes, but I'm getting that title before I go. Like I'm there's nothing's gonna stop me from getting that title. And I'm like, oh, that shows that fire is still there, you know. And Dustin hasn't really talked like that. He's been like, yeah, let's go out there and have fun. Different vibes. I definitely see where you're coming from here.
And it also plays a part in what I think could be one of the big X factors going into this fight, which is, you mentioned before about Verdum versus Kane, and how Verdum really acknowledged how big the altitude was going to be in a way that Kane didn't. I've seen a lot of comments from Dustin Poirier where he's been quite dismissive of the altitude, and he's going up against a guy who trains and lives in Colorado.
Yeah. I'm actually really curious. I'm looking this up now. What is the sea level of Louisiana?
Well, he'll be training in Florida.
It's 8 feet below. Oh, he does train in Florida. Oh, that's right. Yeah. I'm gonna look at Florida on the sea level, because I think they're really low, if I remember right. I mean, Miami is Miami's really low, the sea level. It's humid out there, so that might help with breathing. But I think going from a really low altitude to a high altitude like that could be pretty rough on you.
Yeah.
And you have a guy that's going to run at you and throw everything but the kitchen sink at you.
What would you say is Dustin Poirier's biggest strengths? What do you think is his biggest avenue to victory? Can he just repeat the same game plan against the new technical Gaethje?
I think he can frustrate Gaethje. I think his best thing about him is how. I mean, I think he's probably the best boxer at lightweight right now, if not most of MMA. He's got like a really smooth like shoulder rolls, and like in how he defends himself with punches. He has like a Philly shell, which is like one of the first guys in MMA to really do it and do it that well. Like he had Max Holloway in between rounds of their second fight, him going, my hands hurt. He's blocking weird. I don't like it. My hands hurt. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. That's crazy how he'll put his elbows and hard shoulder bones in the way of your punches to block and just hurt your hands over time. But I think against Justin, Justin's a little more patient, willing to look for it. Um, but he will sometimes throw himself out of position. And I think that's where Dustin can really, really hurt him. Because it seems hard to catch Dustin clean.
Yes.
I mean, Connor did catch him clean with one shot, but Connor, like I said, I rag on him all the time. Connor can still relatively go. You know, Connor's still a fantastic striker. Even if he's very much declined, I think. But it's going to be hard for Gaethje to, I think, land that clean shot against him. And then add in the fact that it's an altitude and 5 rounds. It's going to be interesting to see how much altitude plays into this fight, even though it is a lower weight class. Because in my mind, I feel like for Justin, it's just going to get easier or get harder as the fight goes on, and it'll be easier for Dustin. But now that you bring up that Dustin doesn't care about the sea level thing, he thinks it's nothing. It kind of makes you wonder, like, is this going to be a flip where Dustin is the one gassing first? It's really interesting, but I think the best thing he brings to the table for this matchup is that Philly shell defense he employs.
And he would also be, between the two, the guy more willing to take it to the ground if he wants to try and go for the...
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting sort of wrinkle to add to the mix as well.
Yeah, he has an underrated wrestling game for sure, and he's very good grappler. One of those grapplers you never really see grapple. He's mostly known for his striking, but no, he can grapple. I'm never going to let this go. Charles Oliveira had to cheat to keep him on the ground because Charles Oliveira was, darn near knuckle deep into his gloves. I think it was in the second round.
Yeah, second round, because Dustin gave Charles Oliveira a lot of problems in that first round. Like, I think he dropped him twice.
Almost a 10. Yeah, it was almost a 10-8, if not a 10-8 flat out.
We have got to cover 269.
Charles Oliveira.
We have got to cover 269 for a retro review one day.
I wonder why. Is there a fight? Is there a fight on that card in particular you're interested in?
Yeah, it's sort of like,
is there a certain...
It's it's sort of like my version of OSW trying to do it with the films, that they just try and get the films over and over again.
Okay, if we cover that card, can we cover 277 though?
No deal.
Okay, well, I tried, guys. I tried.
Trying to get this back on a tangent though, because we do have a short space of time for this one. This is a fight that a lot of fans are looking forward to. Which way do you think it's going to go? And what do you think the winner is going to gain from getting this fight? Obviously, the BMF belt is up for grabs, but bearing in mind that Charles Oliveira versus Makhachev, the rematch, is taking place in October, is this just a glorified number one contender match? Is the appetite really there to see the winner of this fight, Makhachev?
I think if Dustin wins, he's probably fighting Dariush, and I think if Justin wins, they might offer him a fight to stay busy, but they'll probably just want to give him a title shot, afterwards. And hopefully their in-ring encounter isn't as awkward as Izzy's with Duplessis.
Yes. Yeah, I was uncomfortable.
That image in my head is... we were sitting there and just okay, this is happening, huh? And it's still going on. Surprised they didn't cut it right there. But,
yeah, because I have to defend MMA a lot of the time, because I think there is still a lot of negative perceptions about the fighters who take part in the sport, unfortunately. And when you see Adesanya and Dricus bringing up those kind of conversations, it's a bit unsettling. It sort of emboldens a lot of the views that people have of the sport.
Yeah, it definitely hurts a little bit, especially me, known as the clown and joker, who I always joke about the sport, even with people who don't really go, and then they go, "This is the stuff you're joking about?" Hold on. hold on here. I'm not touching that. I'm just removing myself from the situation. I'll mention it because it's just that awkward. But it's no, I'm not. I won't touch that topic with a 10-foot pole.
A topic
But
I
for
do
this
want you
one,
to
who
touch
am I
on,
leaning
though,
towards?
is who do you think's going to win this one?
I think I initially had Dustin by a late stoppage or decision, but hearing that he doesn't care about the altitude, I'm changing sides. I think Justin probably could get a stoppage here,
I'm in the
or a
same
decision.
boat.
I,
I'm
I
going to
think
go
it's
for Justin Gaethje late
yeah,
stoppage.
yeah. I think the fact that Dustin doesn't care about the altitude, and Dustin has a very good cardio. The fact that he doesn't care makes me a little uneasy and a little fearful, admittingly. Especially because Louisiana is very low to the low below sea level, as is Miami, or like as is parts of Florida. So I go, okay, that's a big jump for you.
So on that cheery note, it is all the time that we have here for the UFC 291 preview show. I have to say, Joe, I didn't expect us to get as much out of this one. Obviously, I have other commitments. You've got to record the post-fight recap, which hopefully
Recap.
you'll be doing straight after this. So I was wanting to try and make this one maybe a little bit shorter. I thought it would be, but we've still got a good 1 hour and 40 minutes out of this. So credit to ourselves.
We're just too talented, too charismatic, to be contained like that, I suppose.
And we want to say a big thank you to everyone who is continuing to support the channel. Unfortunately, some of our more recent videos haven't really done all that well, but people who have been watching it, we want to say a big thank you. And we do always want to try and make the channel as good as we possibly can. So any sort of feedback is greatly appreciated. If you want to contact us, we've got an Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon all up there at the top of the screen here. Joe, if people want to talk to you specifically, where are the best places to do so?
The best places is Twitter, because that's where I usually keep my professional. I've kind of almost transitioned it to like a mostly professional account on there, and so LocoJoe7 at LocoJoe7, I believe it is, and yeah, it's a. I don't tweet as much as I should. I find myself always going, "Oh, I should tweet this and this to kind of boost everything and kind of make myself a little bit more visible." But I'm always there if you want to shoot me a DM and have some chats about the show, and or you can tell me, hey, your jokes are corny, and I'm gonna probably tell you, yeah, I know. Sadly, I wish I was funnier, guys. I try.
And we have had some people who are asking about the retro reviews. They want to know what we could be seeing between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, we have a lot of pretty good ideas though of what we're doing. There is one I need to shoot. Probably going to try and shoot it tomorrow morning, and I'm very excited about this one. Would you like me to give a little hint at what the
We
next
shall
one
do,
looks like it's
yes.
going to be? Okay. I'm a big fan of promotions, of other promotions outside of the UFCs. And another thing I really enjoy, I like a really good low kick, in fights. And I think that's enough. I think that's probably enough of a little hint there.
I will say I am looking forward to seeing what you can do with this one, Joe, because I personally love this promotion as well. And hopefully you can tune in when it actually does go live on the main INC channel. I'm working on the next video as well. We're going to be celebrating... It's the latest in our MMA's Year series. So we look at a segment of a fighter's career, look at whether or not it was the success or failure that a lot of people make it out to be, which we have done with this one. It's a little bit of a semi-sequel as well, so there are some clues for you there. So that's all to look forward to on the main channel. On the live channel, we got Joe's post-fight reaction of UFC London, which should be on right now. And in 3 weeks' time, we'll be back here to talk about UFC 292 as we go from Salt Lake City to Boston. Aljamain Sterling back in action, potentially his last title defense of bantamweight up against Sean O'Malley. So that's all to look forward to. This is the INC. I've been Karl Bainbridge. That's been Joe Neal. And we hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.